The auctioneer's voice carried across the dusty square of San Andreas, Texas, where Rebecca Zimmerman stood with her shoulders back and her jaw set firm, refusing to let the gathered crowd see her cry as her entire life was placed on the block for strangers to bid upon like cattle at market. The spring of 1878 had brought nothing but hardship to the 24-year-old widow, and now she watched as men she had known her whole life examined her late husband's farm equipment, walked through the fields Thomas had plowed with his own 2 hands, and calculated the worth of everything she held dear. The bank had been patient for nearly a year after Thomas died from a rattlesnake bite that turned his leg black and took him in 3 agonizing days. But patience only stretched so far when money was owed. $400 might as well have been $4,000 for all the ability she had to pay it. And so here she stood, watching her world crumble. Now, folks, we've got ourselves 160 acres of prime Texas land, a sturdy farmhouse, barn, well, and all the equipment you see here, the auctioneer called out, his voice practiced and smooth. But there's a special condition to this here sale, as mandated by the bank holding the note. Rebecca's stomach dropped. She had not been told of any special conditions. The widow Zimmerman comes with the property, the auctioneer continued, and gasps rippled through the crowd. Now hold on. It's all legal and proper. The buyer has the option to marry the widow within 3 months, or she gets to stay on as hired help for 2 years to work off the remainder of the debt. The bank figures a woman alone can't maintain such a property, and they want to ensure their investment. Heat flooded Rebecca's face as dozens of eyes turned toward her. The humiliation burned hotter than the Texas sun beating down on her faded calico dress. She wanted to run, to disappear into the scrubland beyond town, but her feet remained rooted to the spot. Where would she go? She had no family left, no savings, nothing but the clothes on her back and the wedding ring she refused to sell no matter how hungry she got. "This is barbaric," she heard someone mutter, but not loud enough for the banker, Mr. Hutchins, to hear. He stood near the front, arms crossed, looking satisfied with himself. "We'll start the bidding at $300, the auctioneer announced. "300. Called out Jeremiah Morton, a widower in his 60s who owned the neighboring property. Rebecca's skin crawled at the thought. $325. That was Douglas Kemp, a rancher known for working his hired men half to death. The bids climbed slowly, and with each increase, Rebecca felt her future slipping further from her control. She had loved Thomas deeply, had chosen him freely, and now she was being sold like property. The injustice of it made her want to scream, but she held her tongue, knowing that any outburst would only make things worse. The bidding stalled at $400, held by Morton. The auctioneer was raising his gavel when a new voice rang out from the back of the crowd. $1,000. Every head turned. Rebecca craned her neck to see who had spoken and caught sight of a tall figure working his way through the crowd. He was a cowboy by the look of him, wearing trail dusty clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. As he moved closer, she could make out more details. Broad shoulders, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of a winter sky. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Did you say 1,000? The auctioneer sputtered. "Yes, sir. $1,000 cash money." The cowboy reached the front and pulled a leather pouch from his jacket. "I'll count it out right here if you like." The crowd erupted in whispers. Rebecca stared at the stranger, trying to understand what was happening. She had never seen him before in her life, she was certain of that. She would have remembered him. "Well, that's very generous, mister." The auctioneer trailed off, waiting for a name. "Preston Ellis," the cowboy said. Just got back from a cattle drive to Kansas. Brought good money and I am looking to settle down, start my own place. Any other bids? The auctioneer called out, but the amount had shocked everyone into silence. $1,000 was more than twice what the property was worth, even with all the equipment included. The gavel fell with a crack that echoed in Rebecca's chest. Sold to Preston Ellis for $1,000. The crowd began to disperse, some people stopping to congratulate Preston, others shooting pitying looks at Rebecca. She stood frozen, unsure what to do or where to go. Legally, she supposed she now belonged to this stranger, at least in some capacity. The thought made her ill. Preston counted out the money to Mr. Hutchins, who verified the amount with barely concealed glee. Papers were signed, the deed was transferred, and through it all, Preston had not looked at Rebecca once. She wondered if he was afraid to, or if he simply did not care what his purchase looked like. Finally, the business was concluded. Mr. Hutchins departed with his money. The auctioneer packed up his podium, and the last of the onlookers drifted away. Rebecca found herself standing alone in the square with Preston Ellis, the man who now owned everything she had left in the world. He turned to face her then, removing his hat, and she saw that his eyes were kind despite the hard planes of his face. Sun lines crinkled at the corners, and his hair was dark brown, longer than was fashionable, curling slightly at his collar. "Mrs. Zimmerman," he said, his voice quieter now, gentler than when he had called out his bid. "I know this has to be frightening for you. I want you to know I don't hold with the bank's conditions. No woman should be sold like that." Rebecca did not know what to say. Her voice seemed to have abandoned her entirely. Preston reached into his jacket and pulled out the deed that had just been signed over to him. He held it out to her. "This is yours." She stared at the paper, not reaching for it. "I do not understand. The farm is yours. I am giving it back to you, free and clear." He pushed the deed toward her again. "But you just paid $1,000. Rebecca's mind could not make sense of it. "Why would you do that?" "Because it was wrong, what they were doing. I heard about it at the saloon yesterday, and I could not let it stand." Preston's jaw tightened. "My mother was widowed when I was young. She had to work herself near to death to keep us fed because no one would help her. I swore when I got older, if I ever had the means, I would help women in similar situations. I have the means now." Rebecca finally took the deed with trembling hands. She looked down at it, at her name written there as owner, and felt tears spill down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I do not know what to say. Thank you does not seem like enough. It's enough." Preston put his hat back on. "I'll be on my way then. I wish you all the best, Mrs. Zimmerman." He started to turn away, and panic suddenly gripped Rebecca. "Wait, please wait." Preston stopped, looking back at her with a question in his eyes. "You gave away $1,000. That's everything you earned, is it not, from your cattle drive?" The realization had just hit her, and with it came a wave of guilt. "You have left yourself with nothing." "I'll manage. I can always sign on with another drive or find work at one of the ranches." He said it easily, as if giving away a fortune was of no consequence. "That's not right either." Rebecca clutched the deed to her chest. "You should not have to suffer for your kindness. The farm is large. There's more work than I can handle alone, and the house has extra rooms. I could use a hired hand if you're looking for work. I cannot pay much at first, but there would be room and board, and once the crops come in." Preston studied her for a long moment. "You do not owe me anything, Mrs. Zimmerman. I know that, but you need work, and I need help, and it seems foolish for both of us to struggle when we could help each other." She lifted her chin, trying to look more confident than she felt. "Unless you do not want to work for a woman." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first she had seen from him. "I have no problem working for a woman. My mother ran our household with an iron fist and more sense than most men I have known. If you're serious about the offer, I would be grateful to accept." Relief flooded through Rebecca. "I'm serious. Come on then, let me show you your new home." They walked through San Andreas together, past the general store and the church, past the curious stares of townspeople who had witnessed the auction. Rebecca held her head high now, the deed to her farm safely in her possession, her future her own again. Beside her, Preston walked with an easy stride, his saddlebags slung over his shoulder, looking for all the world like this was just another day. The farm was 2 miles outside of town, down a dusty road lined with mesquite trees. As they walked, Rebecca found herself stealing glances at her companion. He had given up everything to help her, a complete stranger. She had heard stories of knights in shining armor from the books Thomas sometimes read to her, but she had never imagined meeting one in real life, especially not dressed in trail-worn denim and dusty boots. "You must think I am terribly helpless," she said after a while, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. Preston looked surprised. "Why would I think that? Because I could not save my own farm. Because I let things get so bad the bank could auction me off like livestock." The bitterness crept into her voice despite her best efforts. "I think you are a woman who was put in an impossible situation," Preston said firmly. "Your husband died, leaving you with debts and a farm too large for one person to manage alone. That's not helplessness, that's just life being cruel. From what I heard in town, you held on for nearly a year by yourself. That takes strength." Rebecca felt her throat tighten with emotion. She had been so focused on her failures that she had not stopped to consider what she had managed to accomplish. Thomas was bitten in August of last year. "I made it through the whole winter and spring." "Exactly. Do you know how many men I have known who could not have done the same?" Preston shook his head. "You have nothing to be ashamed of, Mrs. Zimmerman." "Rebecca," she said impulsively, "if we are going to be living on the same property, you should call me Rebecca." "Only if you call me Preston or just Press. Most folks do." "Press." She tried the name out and found she liked the sound of it. "How long were you on the cattle drive?" 4 months. "We started in southern Texas with 2,000 head, drove them all the way to Dodge City. Lost some to river crossings and a few to rustlers, but most made it through." He spoke matter-of-factly, but Rebecca could imagine the hardship such a journey entailed. "And you spent all your earnings on my farm." She still could not quite believe it. "I spent my earnings on doing the right thing," Press corrected. "There's a difference." They reached the farm as the sun was starting its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Rebecca saw the property through fresh eyes, trying to imagine what Press saw. The house was small but sturdy, built from local timber with a covered porch that Thomas had added the year they married. The barn needed some repairs to the roof and the fences could use mending, but the land itself was good, with a reliable well and rich soil. "It's not much," Rebecca said, suddenly self-conscious. "It's a good piece of land," Press said, surveying the property with an experienced eye. "Your husband knew what he was doing when he claimed this spot. Good water, decent grazing, and that soil will grow just about anything you plant in it." They walked to the house, and Rebecca felt strange inviting someone into what had been her and Thomas's private space. She had not had a guest since the funeral. Inside, everything was neat and clean but sparse. She had sold most of their nice things over the winter to buy food and seeds for planting. "The spare room is through there." She pointed to a door off the main living area. "It's small, but there's a bed and a chest for your things. I'll get you some sheets." "I have a bedroll," Press said. "I do not need much." "You'll have sheets like a civilized person," Rebecca said firmly, then caught herself. I am sorry, I did not mean to be bossy. You have done so much for me, and here I am ordering you around. Press laughed, a warm sound that filled the small house. I like a woman who speaks her mind. My mother would approve of you. Rebecca found herself smiling as she went to the chest where she kept the spare linens. They were worn but clean, and she helped Press make up the bed in the spare room. It felt strangely domestic, this simple task, and she had to remind herself that this was not a husband she was caring for, but an employee. Except she was not paying him anything yet, so perhaps he was more of a partner. She was not sure what to call their arrangement. "Are you hungry?" she asked as they finished. "I do not have much, but I can make some beans and cornbread." "That sounds fine. Can I help?" "You can fetch water from the well if you would like. The bucket is on the porch." They worked together to prepare a simple supper, and Rebecca found herself relaxing for the first time in months. There was something comforting about having another person in the house, hearing footsteps and voices instead of the silence that had pressed down on her since Thomas died. They ate at the small table, and Rebecca found Press was easy to talk to. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about his mother's determination to keep their small farm running after his father died in the war. He had left home at 18 to make his own way, working as a ranch hand and drover, sending money back when he could until his mother remarried a few years ago. "She wrote me that she's happy now," Press said. "Her new husband is a good man, treats her well." It freed me up to stop worrying about her and start thinking about my own future. "And your future includes buying farms for widows?" Rebecca asked, then immediately worried she had overstepped, but Press just smiled. "My future includes settling down eventually, having my own place." "When I heard about your situation, it seemed like the right thing to do. I did not plan much beyond that, to be honest." "Well, I am glad you did not plan too much, or you might have talked yourself out of it." Rebecca stood and began clearing the dishes. "I suppose we should discuss how this is going to work. The planting is mostly done, but the crops need tending. The garden needs weeding, the barn needs repairs, and there are about a dozen other things that need fixing around here. Make me a list tomorrow and I will get started," Press said. "I am good with my hands, and I learn quick." That night, lying in her bed, Rebecca stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning she had woken up facing a nightmare, and now she lay in her own house on her own land, with a deed that said she owned it free and clear. It did not seem real. In the room beyond the wall, she could hear Press moving around, settling in. She wondered what he was thinking, if he regretted his impulsive decision. $1,000 was more money than she had ever seen in one place. He could have started his own ranch, built a life for himself, but instead he had given it all away to help her. She thought of Thomas, of the love they had shared, and felt a pang of guilt for finding Preston Ellis attractive. But Thomas was gone, had been gone for 10 months now, and she was still alive, still young. The preacher had told her at the funeral that life goes on, and she supposed this was what he meant. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was the first peaceful night's rest she had gotten in longer than she could remember. The next morning, Rebecca woke to the sound of someone chopping wood. She dressed quickly and went outside to find Press splitting logs behind the house, his shirt already damp with sweat despite the early hour. He had clearly been at it for a while, and a neat pile of firewood was stacked nearby. "Good morning," she called out. "You did not have to start working so early." Press straightened and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "Force of habit. On the trail, you are up before dawn. My body does not know how to sleep past sunrise anymore." "Well, come inside and have some breakfast. You cannot work on an empty stomach." She made flapjacks with the last of her flour and molasses, and they ate together as the morning sun streamed through the kitchen window. Rebecca found herself studying Press when he was not looking, noticing details she had missed yesterday. The way his hands, scarred and calloused from hard work, handled his fork with surprising delicacy. The way he ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it was a luxury. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "What's the plan for today?" Press asked as he finished his meal. Rebecca had been thinking about this. The vegetable garden desperately needs weeding and the chickens need their coop cleaned. I have been letting things slide because there are not enough hours in the day. I will tackle the chicken coop then. Where are the tools? She showed him to the barn, pointing out where everything was kept. As they walked through the structure, Rebecca noticed Press examining the damaged roof. "This needs to be fixed soon," he said. "Before the summer storms come. Do you have any extra lumber?" "Thomas had some stored, but I am not sure if it's enough." She led him to a corner where planks were stacked. "Will this do?" Press ran his hands over the wood, checking for rot. "This will work. I can get started on that after the coop is done." They worked through the morning, Rebecca in her garden and Press in the chicken coop. It felt good to have help, to not be struggling alone against an endless list of tasks. The garden had been overrun with weeds, and she pulled them with a vengeance, thinking about how close she had come to losing all of this. Around midday, she brought water out to Press, who had moved on to working on the barn roof. He was perched up on the beams, his shirt off now in the heat, and Rebecca tried not to stare at the muscles moving under his sun-bronzed skin. "Water break," she called up. Press climbed down and took the ladle gratefully, drinking deeply. "Thank you. It is hotter than I expected for April." "Wait until July," Rebecca said. "Then you will know real heat." "I have been through Texas summers before," Press assured her. "Though usually on horseback with some breeze, being up on that roof with the sun beating down is something else." "You do not have to push yourself so hard," Rebecca said. "There is no rush. I want to get the roof done before it rains. Once the storms start, it will be too late." Press looked at her, his expression serious. "You have been managing alone for too long, Rebecca. Let me help with the heavy lifting." There was something in the way he said her name that made her heart skip. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and headed back to the house to prepare lunch. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Press worked on the farm repairs with a dedication that amazed Rebecca, and she found herself cooking and cleaning and tending the garden with renewed energy. It was surprising what a difference it made, having someone to share the burden with. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch after supper, watching the sun set and talking about everything and nothing. Press told her stories from the trail, about stampedes and river crossings and nights under the stars. Rebecca shared memories of growing up in San Andreas, of meeting Thomas at a church social when she was 19 and he was 23, of their wedding and the dreams they had shared for their farm. "He sounds like he was a good man," Press said one evening. "He was," Rebecca agreed. "Not perfect, but good. He worked hard and he loved me. I thought we would have a lifetime together." Her voice caught. 10 months ago, he went out to check the fence line and came back with a snake bite on his calf. By the time we got him to the doctor, it was too late. The venom had spread too far. Press reached over and took her hand, a simple gesture of comfort that brought tears to her eyes. "I am sorry you went through that. I am sorry you lost your father in the war," Rebecca said. "It is different, I know, but loss is loss." They sat in silence for a while, hands joined, and Rebecca felt something shift between them. It was too soon to call it love, not with Thomas barely cold in his grave, but it was something. A connection, a possibility, a tenderness that grew with each passing day. A week after Press's arrival, Rebecca went into town for supplies. She had been dreading it, knowing that everyone would want to gossip about the auction and her new living arrangement, but it had to be done. She needed flour and sugar, and some other staples they were running low on. The general store was busy when she arrived, and conversation stopped when she walked through the door. Rebecca lifted her chin and walked to the counter, refusing to be cowed. Mrs. Zimmerman, the shopkeeper, Mr. Wallace, greeted her. "How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you." Rebecca pulled out her list. "I need these items, please." As Mr. Wallace gathered her order, Rebecca became aware of whispers behind her. She turned to see a group of women huddled together, casting glances in her direction. "Is there something you would like to say to me?" Rebecca asked, her patience wearing thin. One of the women, Martha Sullivan, stepped forward. She was the banker's wife, and her expression was pinched with disapproval. "We are simply concerned about your situation, dear. Living alone with a strange man, no proper chaperone, it is not decent." "Press is my hired hand," Rebecca said firmly, "and it is no different than any other farm where men are hired to work the land." "But you are an unmarried woman," Martha pressed. "People will talk." "People are already talking," Rebecca shot back. "They talked when I was being auctioned off like cattle, and they did nothing to help. Preston Ellis did help, and I will not hear a word against him." Martha's face reddened. "Well, I never—" "No, you never did," Rebecca agreed coldly. "You never helped. You never offered a kind word. You just stood by and watched while your husband sold me to the highest bidder." She took her packages from Mr. Wallace, paid, and walked out with her head held high. Her hands were shaking, but she felt strangely exhilarated. For months she had been the object of pity. The poor widow everyone felt sorry for, but no one actually helped. She was done being that woman. When she got back to the farm, Press was working in the field, checking on the sprouting crops. She told him about the encounter, half expecting him to be upset that his reputation was now being questioned along with hers. Instead, he laughed. "Good for you. People like that thrive on others being cowed by their judgment. Sounds like you put her in her place." "I probably made things worse," Rebecca worried. "Now she will tell everyone I am rude on top of everything else." "Let her talk," Press said. "We know the truth, and that is what matters." But the encounter in town had planted a seed of worry in Rebecca's mind. That evening, as they sat on the porch, she brought up something that had been bothering her. Press about the bank's conditions. The part about getting married within 3 months. He looked at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "What about it?" "Well, you are the legal owner of the farm, even if you gave me the deed. And the condition was that the buyer marry me or keep me on as hired help. Does that mean you are supposed to make that choice?" Press was quiet for a long moment. "I have been thinking about that too. Legally, yes, I suppose I am supposed to make a choice. But I already made my choice when I gave you the deed. As far as I am concerned, you are free to do whatever you want. If you want me to leave, I will leave. If you want me to stay as hired help, I will stay. And if you want me to court you properly with the possibility of marriage, well." He trailed off, looking at her intently. "I would be honored to do that too." Rebecca's heart was pounding. "You would want to court me?" "I would," Press said simply, "but only if that is what you want. I do not want you to feel obligated because of some ridiculous bank condition. You have been through enough without me adding pressure." "It has only been a week," Rebecca said, though her heart was already answering for her. "It has," Press agreed, "so we can take our time. Get to know each other properly. See if this feeling between us is real or just circumstance bringing us together." "There is a feeling then?" Rebecca asked softly. "It is not just me." Press reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong. "It is not just you. I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the moment I saw you standing in that square, so brave and strong despite everything. But I know you loved your husband, and I do not want to dishonor his memory by rushing you." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. "Thomas would have liked you, I think. He always said the measure of a man is what he does when no one is watching, when there is nothing in it for him. You did not have to help me. You could have ridden past San Andreas and never looked back. But you did not." "I could not," Press said. "Something in me would not let me walk away." They sat together in the gathering darkness, hands joined, and Rebecca felt hope bloom in her chest for the first time since Thomas died. It was too soon to call it love, perhaps, but it was something worth exploring, something worth giving a chance. The following weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Press continued to repair the farm, fixing the barn roof, mending fences, and helping Rebecca with the heavy work she could not manage alone. The crops grew tall and green, promising a good harvest. The garden flourished under Rebecca's care, providing fresh vegetables for their meals. And through it all, they talked. They talked about everything, learning each other's stories, hopes, and dreams. Press told her about his years on the trail, the freedom and loneliness of that life. Rebecca shared her dreams of expanding the farm, maybe getting some cattle of her own, making the land truly prosperous. Press was unfailingly respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. But there were moments when his hand would brush hers as they worked side by side, or when she would catch him looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. The attraction between them grew stronger with each passing day. One evening in mid-May, about 6 weeks after Press had first arrived, they were sitting on the porch after supper when a rider approached. Rebecca tensed, worried it might be someone from the bank, but as the figure drew closer, she recognized Samuel Cooper, one of the local ranchers. "Evening," Samuel called as he dismounted. "Sorry to disturb you folks." "No disturbance," Press said, standing. "What can we do for you?" "I heard you used to work cattle," Samuel said. "I am running short-handed and wondered if you might be interested in some work." "Just a few weeks, help with the spring roundup. Pay is good." Press glanced at Rebecca, clearly torn. She knew he could use the money, knew his resources had to be running low, but the thought of him leaving, even for a few weeks, made her heart ache. "I have responsibilities here," Press said slowly. "I can manage for a few weeks," Rebecca heard herself say, even though it was not true. "If you need the work, you should take it." Press studied her face. "Are you sure?" "No," she wanted to say. "Stay here with me." But that was selfish, and he had already given up so much for her. "I am sure." "When would you need to start?" "Tomorrow morning," Samuel said. "We are already behind schedule." That night, Press packed his few belongings while Rebecca tried to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. It was only a few weeks, she told herself. He would be back before she knew it. "I do not like leaving you alone," Press said as they stood on the porch in the darkness. "Not after everything." "I managed alone for 10 months, Rebecca reminded him. "I can manage for a few weeks." That was before. Press reached out and cupped her face in his hand, a bold gesture that made her pulse race. "Before I knew you, before I started caring about you." "I care about you too," Rebecca whispered. "More than I probably should, given how recently Thomas passed." "There is no timeline for moving forward," Press said gently. "Your heart will tell you when it is ready." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a sweet, chaste kiss that nonetheless sent warmth flooding through her. "I will be back as soon as I can. And Rebecca, think about what you want." Really want. Not what you think you should want or what is proper, but what your heart wants. Then he was gone, riding off in the darkness towards Samuel Cooper's ranch, and Rebecca was alone again. The next few weeks were harder than Rebecca expected. She had thought she was used to solitude after Thomas died, but having Press there had reminded her what it was like to have a partner, someone to share the burden and the joy. Now the silence pressed down on her once more, making the house feel empty and cold despite the warm spring weather. She threw herself into work, tending the crops and garden with meticulous care. The vegetables were coming in now, and she spent her evenings canning and preserving, storing up food for the winter ahead. Her hands stayed busy, but her mind wandered constantly to Press, wondering how he was, if he was thinking of her 2-3 weeks after he left, on a hot June afternoon. Rebecca was working in the garden when she heard a rider approaching. Her heart leaped, hoping it was Press, but as the figure drew closer she saw it was a stranger. A man in his 40s, well-dressed, with a calculating look in his eyes. "Mrs. Zimmerman," he called out as he dismounted. "Yes." Rebecca stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "My name is Howard Sutton. I represent a railroad company that is looking to purchase land in this area. I would like to make you an offer for your property." Rebecca's stomach sank. "The property is not for sale. I understand you had some financial difficulties recently," Howard pressed. "We are prepared to offer you a very generous price, enough to buy a nice little house in town, live comfortably without all this backbreaking work." "The farm is not for sale," Rebecca repeated firmly. "Please leave." Howard's expression hardened. "Now, Mrs. Zimmerman, let us be reasonable. A woman alone cannot possibly maintain a property this size. It would be much better for you to sell now, before things get difficult again." "I am not alone," Rebecca said, anger rising in her. "I have help, and I am perfectly capable of maintaining my property. Now please leave before I get my rifle." "There is no need for threats," Howard said smoothly. "But you should know the railroad is coming through this area whether you want it or not. It would be in your best interest to sell willingly rather than force us to find other ways to acquire the land we need." The veiled threat made Rebecca's blood run cold, but she stood her ground. "Get off my property. Now." Howard mounted his horse, but before riding off he said, "I will be back with a better offer. Think carefully about your future, Mrs. Zimmerman. Women in your position do not have the luxury of stubbornness." Rebecca watched him ride away, her hands shaking with anger and fear. She had heard stories about the railroads and how they got the land they wanted. She did not have the money or resources to fight a big company if they decided to push the matter. That night, she lay awake worrying about what Howard Sutton's visit meant. Just when she thought things were finally settling down, a new threat appeared. She wished desperately that Press was there, not because she could not handle things herself, but because it was always easier to face problems with someone by your side. 2 days later, Press returned. Rebecca was feeding the chickens when she saw him riding up the road, and her heart soared. She wanted to run to him, to throw herself into his arms, but she restrained herself, waiting as he dismounted and walked toward her. "Rebecca," he said, and the way he said her name made her knees weak. "I missed you." "I missed you too," she admitted. "It was harder than I expected being alone again." "You are not alone anymore," Press said, stepping closer. "Not if you do not want to be." She looked up at him, seeing the question in his eyes, and made her decision. She had spent 3 weeks thinking about what Press had said, about what she really wanted, and the answer was clear. She wanted him. Not because she needed rescuing, not because she was lonely, but because he was kind and strong and made her laugh. Because he treated her as an equal, not as a fragile thing to be protected. Because when she imagined her future, he was in it. "I do not want to be alone anymore," Rebecca said softly. "I want you to stay, not as my hired hand, but as my partner, my husband if you will have me." Press's face lit up with a smile that transformed him. "If I will have you. Rebecca, I have been half in love with you since the day I saw you in that town square. I will marry you tomorrow if you will say yes." "Yes," Rebecca breathed, and then Press was kissing her, really kissing her, and it was nothing like the chaste peck on the forehead before he left. This was a kiss full of promise and passion, a kiss that spoke of longing and hope and a future they would build together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rebecca remembered the other issue that had been weighing on her. "Press, something happened while you were gone." She told him about Howard Sutton and the railroad company, about the veiled threats and the implication that they would not take no for an answer. Press's expression grew serious as he listened. "I have heard of Sutton," he said grimly. "He has a reputation for getting what he wants by fair means or foul, but he cannot force you to sell. As long as you hold the deed and the property taxes are paid, the land is yours. But what if they try something? I have heard stories about what happens to people who stand in the way of the railroad." "Then we will deal with it together," Press said firmly. "I am not going to let anyone take this farm from you. From us," he corrected himself. "If we are getting married, this is our future we are protecting." Rebecca felt relief wash over her. "When should we get married?" "As soon as possible," Press said. "I want to make this official. Make it clear to everyone, including railroad men like Sutton, that you have a husband to stand beside you." They rode into town the next day and spoke to Reverend Mitchell, who agreed to marry them on Sunday after the regular church service. It was a short engagement, only 4 days, but Rebecca did not care about convention anymore. She had spent too long worrying about what other people thought, and she was done with that. The news spread through San Andreas like wildfire. Some people were scandalized by the quick engagement, claiming Rebecca was dishonoring Thomas's memory. Others were more understanding, recognizing that a widow needed security and that Press had proven himself to be a good man. On Sunday morning, Rebecca dressed in her best dress, a simple blue calico that Thomas had liked. She pinned her dark hair up carefully and took a moment to look at herself in the small mirror by her bed. She looked nervous but happy, she decided. Scared but hopeful, Press was waiting for her at the church, dressed in new clothes he had bought in town. He looked handsome and solid and real, and when he saw her, his whole face softened with love. The ceremony was simple. Reverend Mitchell spoke about commitment and partnership, about building a life together through good times and bad. When it came time for the vows, Press took Rebecca's hands in his and spoke clearly. "I promise to stand by you, to support you, to treat you as my equal partner in all things. I promise to work hard for our future and to cherish you all the days of my life." Rebecca's voice shook slightly as she made her own promises. "I promise to stand by you, to trust you, to build a life with you based on honesty and respect. I promise to be your partner in all things and to love you for as long as I live." They exchanged simple gold bands that Press had bought with the wages from his work at Samuel Cooper's ranch. And then Reverend Mitchell pronounced them husband and wife. Press kissed her softly, mindful that they were in church, but Rebecca could feel the promise of more behind that gentle kiss. A small group of well-wishers gathered outside the church to congratulate them. Samuel Cooper was there, along with a few other neighbors who had always been kind. Martha Sullivan, the banker's wife, was noticeably absent, but Rebecca found she did not care. They rode back to the farm together, and for the first time it felt like their farm, not just hers. Press helped her down from the wagon and they stood for a moment looking at the house, the barn, the fields stretching out under the summer sun. "We should celebrate," Press said. "This is our wedding day." "We do not have champagne or cake," Rebecca pointed out. "We have each other," Press said. "That is celebration enough." He swept her up in his arms, making her laugh in surprise, and carried her over the threshold of the house. Inside, he set her down gently but did not let go, his arms wrapped around her waist. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. Rebecca considered the question honestly. "A little. It has been a while since Thomas, and I do not know if you will be disappointed." I could never be disappointed, Press assured her. We will figure this out together just like everything else. He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Rebecca felt her nervousness fade away. This was Press, her husband, her partner, the man who had given up everything to help her. She trusted him completely. They made love that afternoon in the bedroom that had been Rebecca's alone for so long, and it was sweet and tender and right. Press was gentle and patient, making sure she was comfortable, that she felt safe. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the sheets, and Rebecca felt a contentment she had not known was possible after loss. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily. "I did not think I could love again after Thomas, but I do. I love you." "I love you too," Press said, kissing her forehead. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you stood up to that auctioneer, refusing to cry in front of everyone. You were so brave." "I did not feel brave. I felt terrified. Bravery is not the absence of fear," Press said. "It is doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. You are the bravest person I know." They spent the rest of the day in bed, talking and laughing and learning each other's bodies. It felt decadent to waste a whole day on pleasure, but Press insisted. "We are allowed to be happy," he said when Rebecca mentioned all the work waiting for them. "The farm will still be there tomorrow. Today is ours." As the sun set, they finally got dressed and made a simple supper. They ate on the porch, watching the stars come out, and Rebecca thought about how much her life had changed in just 2 months. She had gone from facing total ruin to being married to a man she loved, with her farm secure and her future bright. "What are you thinking about?" Press asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "How lucky I am," Rebecca said. "How different things could have been if you had not shown up at that auction." "I am the lucky one," Press countered. "I was drifting, going from one cattle drive to the next with no real purpose." "You gave me a home, a future, something to build toward. We gave each other those things," Rebecca said. "That is what partners do." The next morning they woke early and got to work on the farm. There was a lot to do, and they worked side by side throughout the day, falling into an easy rhythm. Press handled the heavier tasks, but he never made Rebecca feel incapable or weak. When she had ideas about crop rotation or where to plant the new apple trees she wanted, he listened and valued her input. A week after their wedding, Howard Sutton returned. Rebecca was in the garden when she saw him riding up, and her stomach clenched with anxiety. But before she could go to meet him, Press emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "Stay there," he called to Rebecca. "I will handle this." Rebecca watched as Press walked out to meet Sutton, his posture relaxed but alert. She could not hear what was being said, but she saw Sutton's confident expression falter as Press spoke. The conversation lasted only a few minutes before Sutton wheeled his horse around and rode off, looking displeased. Press walked back to where Rebecca was standing. "He will not be bothering you any more." "What did you say to him?" "I reminded him that harassment and threats are illegal, and that if he sets foot on our property again without an invitation, I will have him arrested for trespassing. I also mentioned that I have friends who work for rival railroad companies who would be very interested to hear about his intimidation tactics." Rebecca stared at her husband with new appreciation. "You really have friends in rival railroad companies?" Press grinned. "I have no idea." "But he does not know that." She laughed and threw her arms around him. "You are wonderful." "I am practical," Press corrected. "Bullies like Sutton back down when they meet resistance. He will move on to easier targets." Press was right. They never heard from Howard Sutton again, though they learned later that the railroad had purchased land on the other side of San Andreas, nowhere near their farm. The summer passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. The crops came in strong, better than Rebecca had managed in previous years. Press's experience with cattle led them to purchase a small herd, just 10 cows to start, but it was a beginning. They worked from sunrise to sunset, then fell into bed exhausted but satisfied. In August, on what would have been the anniversary of Thomas's death, Rebecca put flowers on his grave and stood quietly for a while. Press waited by the wagon, giving her privacy, but when she returned to him, she felt at peace. "Thank you for understanding," she said as they drove home. "Thomas was part of your life, part of what made you who you are," Press said. "I am not threatened by that. I am grateful to him for loving you the way you deserve to be loved." Rebecca took his hand. "I think you two would have been friends." "I like to think so too." That night, as they lay in bed, Rebecca felt a flutter in her stomach that she had been noticing for a few weeks now. She had not said anything yet, not wanting to get Press's hopes up if she was wrong, but she was fairly certain now of what it meant. "Press, I think I might be expecting a baby." Press went very still beside her. "Are you sure?" "Fairly sure. I have not had my monthly courses since before we married, and I have been feeling queasy in the mornings. And I remember this feeling from before, when I was pregnant with the baby I lost." She had told Press about the pregnancy she had lost 2 years ago, how she had carried for 4 months before waking one night in terrible pain and blood. The doctor said it happened sometimes, that there was nothing anyone could have done, but it had devastated her and Thomas both. "How do you feel about it?" Press asked carefully. "Scared," Rebecca admitted. "Scared that something will go wrong again, but also happy, excited. Is that wrong?" "It is not wrong at all." Press pulled her close, his hand splaying protectively over her still flat stomach. "We will get through this together, whatever happens, and I will take care of you, make sure you do not overwork yourself." "I am not fragile," Rebecca protested. "I know you are not, but there is no shame in accepting help, especially now." Press kissed her temple. "Let me worry about the heavy work. You focus on taking care of yourself and our baby." Over the following weeks, Press was true to his word. He took over most of the physical labor on the farm, insisting Rebecca rest when she needed to. At first, she chafed at the restrictions, but as her pregnancy progressed and fatigue set in, she became grateful for his attentiveness. In September, Dr. Harris confirmed what Rebecca already knew. She was about 3 months along, he estimated, and everything looked healthy so far. He cautioned her to avoid heavy lifting and to rest when she felt tired, but otherwise said she could continue with her normal activities. Press was over the moon with excitement, already making plans for the nursery and talking about teaching their child to ride and work the land. His joy was infectious, and Rebecca found herself getting more excited too, though a part of her remained cautious, remembering her previous loss. The autumn brought harvest time, and it was a good year. They had more produce than they could use themselves, so they sold the excess in town. The money went toward building up their herd and making improvements to the farm. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and that was more than Rebecca had dared hope for a year ago. In October, on a crisp autumn evening, they were sitting on the porch when Press suddenly said, "I want to adopt you officially." Rebecca looked at him, confused. "What? Not you," Press laughed. "I meant adopt a child. There are so many orphans, children who lost their parents to disease or accidents or the war. We have room in our house and our hearts. What would you think about adopting a child in addition to the baby we are expecting?" Rebecca had never considered it, but once Press said it, the idea took root. "I think that would be wonderful, but should we wait until after the baby is born?" "Probably," Press agreed. "Get settled with one child before taking on another, but sometime in the future I would like to do that." "I would like that too," Rebecca said, resting her hand on her growing belly. "We have so much to give." Winter arrived with cold winds and occasional snow. Rebecca was 6 months along now, her pregnancy obvious, and she spent more time inside, sewing baby clothes and preparing the spare room as a nursery. Press had built a beautiful cradle from wood he salvaged from a fallen tree on their property, and it sat waiting in the corner of their bedroom. On Christmas Eve, they attended the church service in town. Rebecca was tired from the outing, but it felt good to be part of the community, to sit beside her husband and sing carols and feel the life growing inside her kick and turn. As they left the church, Martha Sullivan approached them. Rebecca tensed, expecting another lecture about propriety or judgment about their quick marriage, but the older woman surprised her. "Mrs. Ellis," Martha said, using Rebecca's married name. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior earlier this year. I was wrong to judge you and wrong not to help when you needed it. You and your husband have proven that sometimes unconventional situations can work out for the best." Rebecca was so shocked she almost could not respond. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. That means a lot. When is the baby due?" Martha asked, her eyes on Rebecca's rounded belly. "Late February or early March," Rebecca said. "My daughter will be having her first around the same time. Perhaps they will be friends growing up together." As they drove home through the cold night, Rebecca reflected on how much had changed. The town that had once viewed her with pity, and then scandal, now accepted her marriage and seemed genuinely happy for her growing family. "What are you thinking about?" Press asked, as he often did when she got quiet. "How grateful I am. For you, for this life we are building, for this baby. A year ago I was alone and hopeless. Now I have everything." "We have everything," Press corrected gently, "and it is only going to get better." The winter passed slowly, as winters do, and Rebecca grew larger and more uncomfortable as her due date approached. Press was attentive and patient, rubbing her aching back and helping her with tasks that had become difficult. He read to her in the evenings, everything from the Bible to novels he borrowed from the church library, and they talked endlessly about their plans for the future. In late February, Rebecca woke in the middle of the night with a pain in her lower back. At first, she thought it was just another ache from the pregnancy, but as the pain came and went in regular waves, she realized what was happening. "Press," she said, shaking his shoulder. "The baby is coming." Press was instantly awake, all business. He helped her out of bed, got her comfortable in the rocking chair, and then rode into town to fetch Dr. Harris and the midwife, Mrs. Chen. Rebecca had wanted Mrs. Chen present. She was a Chinese woman who had come to San Andreas 10 years ago and had a reputation for being excellent at delivering babies. The labor was long and difficult. Rebecca had been warned that first babies often took their time, but knowing that did not make it easier. Press stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. "You can do this," he told her over and over. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." Mrs. Chen was calm and efficient, checking on Rebecca's progress, giving her sips of water, helping her find comfortable positions. Dr. Harris hovered in the background, ready to intervene if there were complications, but Mrs. Chen seemed confident everything was progressing normally. As dawn broke on February 28th, Rebecca felt an overwhelming urge to push. Mrs. Chen encouraged her, guiding her through it, and Press supported her from behind, taking her weight as she bore down with all her strength. "The head is crowning," Mrs. Chen announced. "One more big push, Rebecca. You are almost there." Rebecca gathered every ounce of strength she had left and pushed with everything in her. There was a moment of intense pressure and then sudden release, and the room filled with the sound of a baby crying. "It is a boy, Mrs. Chen said, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy baby boy." Rebecca burst into tears of relief and joy as Mrs. Cheng cleaned the baby and then placed him in her arms. He was perfect, tiny and red-faced and screaming his displeasure at being forced into the cold world, but perfect. "Hello, little one," Rebecca whispered. "Hello, my sweet boy." Press was crying too, she realized, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. "He is beautiful. You are amazing. I love you so much." "I love you too," Rebecca said. "Do you want to hold him?" Press took the baby gently, cradling him like he was made of glass. The infant quieted, seemingly comforted by his father's strong arms, and looked up with unfocused eyes. "What should we name him?" Press asked. They had discussed names for months but had not made a final decision. Now, looking at her husband holding their son, Rebecca knew what felt right. "Thomas," she said. "Thomas Preston Ellis, for the two men who gave me everything." Press's expression was one of profound gratitude. "Are you sure? I do not want you to feel obligated because of the sacrifice Thomas made." "I am sure," Rebecca said firmly. "Thomas would have loved you. He would be happy knowing our son carries his name. And Preston for you, the man who saved us and gave us this life." "Thomas Preston Ellis," Press repeated, testing the sound of it. "Welcome to the world, Tommy." Dr. Harris and Mrs. Chen finished their work and left, promising to check back in a few days. Press helped Rebecca into bed, placed little Tommy in the cradle beside her, and then climbed in himself, utterly exhausted. "We did it," Rebecca said, reaching for his hand. "We have a family." "We do," Press agreed. "And it is just the beginning." Tommy was a good baby, fussy at times but generally content. He had Rebecca's dark hair and Press's blue eyes, and they both thought he was the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. Press was besotted with his son, spending hours just watching him sleep or holding him while Rebecca rested. The farm work continued, of course, but they adjusted to the new rhythm of life with an infant. Neighbors stopped by with gifts and food, helping them through the difficult first weeks. Even Martha Sullivan came by with a beautiful hand-knit blanket for Tommy, and Rebecca found herself forgiving the woman for her earlier judgment. Spring arrived, bringing new life to the farm. As Rebecca recovered from childbirth, she helped with the planting, though Press insisted she not overdo it. They hired a young man from town, Jacob Miller, to help with the heavy work, paying him a fair wage from their harvest profits. One day in late April, as Rebecca was hanging laundry while Tommy napped in a basket in the shade, she saw a wagon approaching. As it drew closer, she recognized Samuel Cooper, but he was not alone. A woman sat beside him, and in the back of the wagon were 3 children. "Rebecca," Samuel called as he pulled up. "Sorry to drop by unannounced. This is my sister Mary and her children. There was a fire at their place in Arkansas, lost everything. I am taking them in, but I am wondering if you might have some clothes to spare. The children lost everything they owned." Rebecca looked at the 3 scared, soot-stained faces staring back at her and felt her heart break. "Of course. Come inside." She gathered clothes that Tommy had already outgrown, plus some of her own things she could spare. As she handed them over, she looked at the oldest child, a girl of about 8 with solemn brown eyes. "What is your name?" Rebecca asked gently. "Annie," the girl said softly. "Annie Cooper." "It is nice to meet you, Annie. I am sorry about what happened to your home." "Thank you, madam." Annie clutched the bundle of clothes to her chest like they were precious jewels. After the Coopers left, Rebecca could not stop thinking about those 3 children and the fear in their eyes. That evening, as she and Press sat on the porch with Tommy sleeping in her arms, she brought it up. "Remember when you mentioned adopting a child?" Press looked at her carefully. "Yes." "Why?" "Samuel Cooper's niece and nephews. They lost everything. Mary is trying to take care of them alone, and Samuel is doing what he can, but he is a bachelor with no experience with children." Rebecca took a breath. What if we offered to take one of them? Just until Mary gets back on her feet, or permanently if that works better for everyone. Are you sure you are ready for that? Press asked. Tommy is only 2 months old. I know, but I cannot stop thinking about those children. We have so much, Press. We have this beautiful farm, a warm house, plenty of food. We could help. Press was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Let me talk to Samuel and Mary, see what they think. But if everyone agrees, then yes, I think it is a wonderful idea. A week later, 8-year-old Annie Cooper moved into their home. She was shy at first, barely speaking, clearly traumatized by losing her home and being separated from her mother and brothers. But Rebecca and Press were patient, giving her space while also making sure she knew she was safe and wanted. Slowly, Annie began to open up. She was a smart girl, eager to help, and she took to baby Tommy immediately, becoming his fiercely protective big sister. She helped Rebecca with the garden and housework, and Press started teaching her to ride and care for the animals. Mary Cooper visited regularly, and it became clear that while she loved her children, she was struggling to provide for all 3 of them on her own. 6 months after Annie came to stay, Mary approached Rebecca with tears in her eyes. Would you consider adopting Annie permanently? Mary asked. I can see how happy she is here, how much she has bloomed. You and Press can give her opportunities I never could. I am not giving her up because I do not love her, but because I do. It was the hardest thing Rebecca had ever been asked, taking another woman's child permanently, but she could also see the truth in Mary's words. Annie had become part of their family, and sending her back would hurt everyone involved. If that is what you want, and what Annie wants, then yes, Rebecca said. But Mary, you can visit any time. She is your daughter, and she should know her mother and her brothers. Mary hugged her, crying. Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. They asked Annie what she wanted, explaining that she could stay with them forever if she chose, or return to her mother if that was what she preferred. Annie thought about it seriously, then said, Can I stay here but still see Mama and my brothers? Of course, Press assured her. This is your home now, but your first family will always be part of your life too. The adoption was finalized in the fall of 1879, and Annie officially became Annie Cooper Ellis. She cried happy tears when they gave her the papers, and Rebecca realized that while she had lost so much in the fire, she had also gained a stable, loving home. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Tommy grew from an infant into a toddler, chasing chickens and getting into everything with the boundless energy of a young child. Annie started attending the school in San Andreas, proving to be an excellent student. The farm prospered, and they were able to expand their herd and build a larger barn. In the spring of 1881, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. She was nervous, remembering how difficult Tommy's birth had been, but this time her body seemed to know what to do. In November, she delivered a healthy baby girl with minimal complications. They named her Emma Rose Ellis, Rose for Rebecca and Emma because they both just liked the name. Emma was completely different from Tommy. Where he had been calm, she was fussy. Where he had slept through the night at 2 months, Emma did not sleep through the night until she was nearly a year old. But she was also joyful and sweet, with Rebecca's dark eyes and Press's smile. Annie was a wonderful big sister to both children, patient with Tommy's endless questions and gentle with Emma's cries. Rebecca often marveled at how their family had come together, each piece fitting perfectly even though none of it had been planned. Press's mother came to visit in the summer of 1882, making the long journey from Missouri with her new husband. She was a small, formidable woman who looked at Rebecca with assessing eyes, until she saw the way Press looked at his wife, and the way their children clearly adored both parents. Then she softened and hugged Rebecca tight. "You are good for my boy," she said. "I can see he is happy." "He is good for me too," Rebecca replied. "He saved my life in more ways than one." They had a wonderful visit, with Press's mother sharing stories about his childhood that made Annie and Tommy laugh and made Press groan with embarrassment. Before she left, she pulled Rebecca aside. "I was worried about him for so long," she confessed. "Drifting from place to place, never settling down. I thought he would end up alone and restless his whole life. But you gave him a home, a purpose. Thank you for that." "He gave me the same things," Rebecca said. "We saved each other." The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and growth. The farm expanded, becoming one of the most successful in the area. Press's instincts about cattle proved sound, and their herd grew to nearly 100 head. They hired more help, treating their workers fairly and earning a reputation as good employers. Tommy grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved animals and could spend hours watching the cattle or training the farm dogs. Emma was all energy and mischief, constantly testing boundaries and making everyone laugh. Annie grew into a beautiful young woman, smart and capable, with plans to become a teacher. In 1885, when Annie was 15 and preparing for the teacher's examination, Mary Cooper died suddenly from pneumonia. Annie was devastated, and Rebecca held her as she cried, grieving the mother she had lost twice, once to circumstance and now to death. "She loved you so much," Rebecca told her. "She made the hardest choice a mother can make, putting your needs above her own desires. That is real love." "I know," Annie sobbed, "and I love her, but I love you too. You are also my mother." "I am honored to be," Rebecca said honestly. "You are my daughter in every way that matters." Mary's 2 sons, now young men, came to the funeral and stayed for a week after. They had grown into good men despite their hardships, and they told Annie stories about their mother that made her laugh through her tears. Before they left, they thanked Rebecca and Press for taking such good care of their sister. "She got opportunities we never could have given her," the older boy said. "Mama made the right choice, hard as it was." Life continued its forward march. In 1888, Annie passed her teaching examination and was hired at the San Andreas School. She was an excellent teacher, patient and creative, and her students loved her. Rebecca and Press were bursting with pride. Tommy, now 10, was already helping Press with the cattle in earnest, showing a natural talent for ranching. Emma, at 7, was learning to read and write and drive Rebecca to distraction with her endless questions and boundless curiosity. Press was now in his early 40s, with silver threading through his dark hair. Rebecca was 34, with laugh lines around her eyes and a few gray hairs of her own. They had been married for 10 years, and Rebecca loved him more now than she had on their wedding day. The passion was still there, but it had been deepened by years of partnership, of facing challenges together, of building a life side by side. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Press took her hand. "Do you ever regret it, marrying me so quickly? You barely knew me." "Not for a single second," Rebecca said firmly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Well, you and our children. Even with all the hard times, the struggles." Press had been thinking lately about everything they had been through, the lean years and the good years, the losses and the gains. "Especially with the hard times," Rebecca said. "Anyone can be a good partner when things are easy. You have been my rock through everything. You never made me feel weak or incapable, even when I needed help. You have been my equal partner in every way." "You have made me a better man," Press said. "Before you, I was just drifting through life. You gave me purpose, gave me a family, gave me a home. I should be thanking you." "We gave each other those things," Rebecca said, echoing words she had spoken years ago. That is what partners do. They sat in comfortable silence, hands joined, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. In the distance, they could hear Tommy calling the cattle in for the evening and Emma's laughter as she played with the dogs. Inside, Annie was preparing supper, humming to herself. "I have been thinking," Press said. "In a few years, when the children are more grown, maybe we should take a trip. See some of the country beyond Texas. I would like to show you the Missouri hills where I grew up and maybe go out to California, see the ocean." "I would like that," Rebecca said, the idea appealing to her. She had never traveled far from San Andreas. "Though I am not sure what we would do with the farm. Annie is old enough to manage for a few weeks, especially with Jacob and the other hands to help. She practically runs the place already." Press squeezed her hand. "You deserve an adventure, Rebecca. You have worked so hard for so long." "We have worked hard," Rebecca corrected. "And yes, an adventure sounds wonderful. Let us plan it for next year, give Annie time to prepare and make sure the farm is in good shape." In the spring of 1890, they made their trip. They left Tommy and Emma in Annie's capable care, with strict instructions and money for emergencies, and set out by train. It was Rebecca's first time on a train, and she was fascinated by the speed, by the way the landscape rushed past the windows. They visited Press's childhood home in Missouri, now occupied by his mother and stepfather. The rolling green hills were so different from the Texas plains, and Rebecca understood a little better what had shaped Press into the man he was. They stayed for 2 weeks, and Rebecca got to know her mother-in-law better, forming a warm friendship with the older woman. From Missouri, they traveled west to California. The journey took days, but finally they arrived in San Francisco. Rebecca had never seen anything like it. The huge city with buildings taller than she had imagined, streets crowded with people from all over the world. They spent a week exploring, visiting the harbor and the markets, eating food from cultures Rebecca had never experienced. But the highlight was the ocean. They took a day trip to the coast, and Rebecca stood on the beach with the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly before her and cried at the beauty of it. Press stood beside her, his arm around her waist, and together they watched the waves roll in. "It is so vast," Rebecca breathed. "I had no idea the world was so big." "There is so much out there," Press agreed. "But I am happy with our little corner of it, our farm, our family. That is all I need." "Me too," Rebecca said. "This is wonderful, but I am already looking forward to going home." They returned to Texas in late May, brown and relaxed and full of stories. Tommy and Emma demanded to hear every detail, while Annie smiled and served them tea and told them everything that had happened at the farm in their absence. Nothing major, just the normal rhythms of life, and Rebecca felt grateful that they had such a capable daughter. The 1890s brought change to San Andreas and to Texas as a whole. The railroad finally came through, though thankfully not through their property as Howard Sutton had threatened years ago. The town grew, gaining new businesses and residents. Automobiles began to appear, though they were rare and unreliable. The world was modernizing, but on the Ellis farm, life continued much as it always had. Annie married in 1893, a nice young man named Daniel Wright who worked at the bank. Rebecca and Press gave her away together, both of them crying as she walked down the aisle. She and Daniel built a small house in town, near the school where Annie taught, and visited the farm regularly. Tommy took over more and more of the ranch operations as he got older, proving to have excellent instincts for business as well as cattle. At 18, he was effectively running the day-to-day operations, freeing Press to focus on the bigger picture and to finally slow down a bit. Emma surprised everyone by developing an interest in medicine. At 16, she began apprenticing with Dr. Harris, who was getting older and needed help with his practice. She was smart and dedicated, with a gentle touch that put patients at ease. Dr. Harris said she was the best assistant he had ever had. In 1895, when Rebecca was 41 and Press was 47, they celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. They had a big party at the farm, with all their friends and neighbors invited. Annie and Daniel were there with their baby daughter, Rebecca's first grandchild. Tommy was courting a nice girl from town, and Emma was deep in conversation with Dr. Harris about some medical matter. As Rebecca looked around at all the people gathered on their land, at the prosperity they had built, at the family they had created, she felt overwhelming gratitude. 27 years ago, she had stood in a dusty square and watched her life being auctioned away. She had been certain her future was over, that she would never be happy again. But then Press had appeared, a stranger who became her savior and then her partner and then the love of her life. He had given her back her freedom, her farm, her dignity. And in return, she had given him a home, a family, a purpose. They had built something beautiful together, something lasting. "What are you thinking about?" Press asked, coming up beside her with 2 glasses of lemonade. "That I am the luckiest woman alive," Rebecca said, taking one of the glasses. "That I love you more than words can say." "I love you too," Press said. "More every day if that is possible." Tommy rang the dinner bell then, calling everyone to eat. Long tables had been set up under the trees, laden with food that the women had prepared. Children ran and played while adults talked and laughed. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Rebecca looked at her husband and smiled. They had been through so much together. Loss and grief, hardship and struggle, but also joy and love and triumph. They had raised children, built a successful ranch, created a life worth living. And they had done it all together, as equal partners, just as they had promised on their wedding day. As the party continued around them, Press pulled Rebecca close and kissed her forehead, that same tender gesture he had made the night before he left for Samuel Cooper's ranch all those years ago. "Here's to the next 17 years," he said. "And all the years after that," Rebecca added. "I want to grow old with you, Press. Watch our grandchildren grow up, see what the new century brings." "I want that too," Press said. "Whatever the future holds, we will face it together." The party went late into the night with music and dancing and laughter. When it was finally over, and the guests had all gone home, Rebecca and Press stood on their porch and looked out over their land. The house where they had built their life, the barn where Press had fixed the roof all those years ago, the fields that produced crops year after year, the pastures where their cattle grazed. "We did good," Press said simply. "We did," Rebecca agreed. "We did very good indeed." They went inside, to the home they had made together, and closed the door on another day of their beautiful, hard-won life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to treasure. But whatever came, they would face it together. The widow and the cowboy who had saved each other, whose love had built something lasting and true. Years continued to pass in the easy rhythm they had established. The new century arrived in 1900 with celebrations and optimism, though on the Ellis farm, it was just another year of work and family, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. Press was now 52, his hair more silver than brown, but he was still strong and capable. Rebecca, at 46, had laugh lines etched deeply around her eyes and mouth, proof of years of happiness. Tommy married his sweetheart, Sarah Mitchell, in 1901, and they built a house on the far end of the Ellis property, expanding the ranch and continuing its success into the next generation. They gave Rebecca and Press 2 more grandchildren, boys with Tommy's serious nature and Sarah's quick smile. Emma completed her medical training under Dr. Harris, and in 1903 became the first female doctor in San Andreas. Some people were skeptical at first, but her skill and dedication quickly won them over. She opened her own practice in town, and patients came from miles around to see her. Annie and Daniel had 3 children by 1905, and Annie had become the principal of the San Andreas School, respected throughout the county for her educational innovations. All 3 of their children had inherited their mother's love of learning. In the spring of 1906, Rebecca and Press celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary quietly, just the 2 of them. They took a picnic out to their favorite spot by the creek, the same place where Press had proposed all those years ago, and sat together in the shade of the old oak tree. "Do you remember what you told me that first day?" Rebecca asked, resting her head on Press's shoulder. "When you gave me the deed." "I remember," Press said. "I told you that what the bank did was wrong, that no woman should be sold like that." "You saved me that day," Rebecca said. "Not just from the auction, but from giving up. I thought my life was over, that I would never be happy again. But you showed me that new beginnings are possible, that love can come when you least expect it." "You saved me too," Press reminded her. "I was drifting, going nowhere. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to put down roots. We saved each other." Rebecca turned to look at her husband, seeing the young cowboy he had been overlaid with the older man he had become. His face was lined with age and weather, his body not quite as strong as it once was, but his eyes were the same, kind and full of love. "If I had to do it all again, knowing everything that would happen, all the struggles and hard times, I would not change a single thing," Rebecca said. "Because it led me here to this moment with you." "Neither would I," Press said, kissing her softly. "You are my greatest adventure, Rebecca Ellis, my greatest joy." They sat together until the sun began to set, talking about their children and grandchildren, about the changes coming to Texas and the world, about their hopes for the future. When they finally made their way back to the house, hand in hand, Rebecca felt a deep and abiding contentment. She had lost so much in her life. Her parents, her first husband, a baby she had carried and never got to meet. She had faced poverty and humiliation, had stood in a town square and been sold like property. But through all of that, she had never completely lost hope, and that hope had been rewarded beyond her wildest dreams. Preston Ellis had given her back her freedom that day in San Andreas, but that was just the beginning. Over the years, he had given her so much more: partnership, respect, love, family, joy. He had stood beside her through everything, never wavering, never making her feel less than his equal, and she had given him the same things in return. That was the secret, she thought. Not just love, though that was essential, but true partnership. 2 people building something together, supporting each other, lifting each other up when times got hard. As they sat on their porch that evening, watching the stars come out one by one, Rebecca thought about the scared young widow she had been and the strong, confident woman she had become. Press had helped with that transformation, but ultimately, she had done it herself, with him beside her. "Thank you," she said suddenly. Press looked at her with a question in his eyes. "For what?" "For everything. For seeing me that day, for helping me, for loving me, for giving me the chance to build this life." "Thank you for letting me be part of it," Press replied. "Thank you for taking a chance on a drifter cowboy with nothing to offer but his heart and his willingness to work hard." "You had everything to offer," Rebecca said firmly. "You still do." They sat together until late, as they had done thousands of times before, comfortable in the silence and in each other's presence. Inside the house, the clock ticked steadily, marking the passage of time. But out on the porch, in the warm Texas night, time seemed to stand still, holding them in a perfect moment of peace and love and belonging. This was their reward for all the hardships they had endured. Not wealth, though they had achieved financial security. Not fame, though they were respected in their community. Their reward was this: each other, their family, their home, their life built together through years of partnership and love. Rebecca Ellis, once Rebecca Zimmerman, the widow who had been auctioned with her farm, looked at her husband and smiled. Preston Ellis, the cowboy who had bought both and given her back the deed, smiled back. And in that smile was everything they had built together, everything they had survived, everything they had become. The moon rose high over the Texas plains, casting silver light across the land they had worked so hard to maintain and improve. In the pastures, cattle grazed peacefully. In the barn, horses slept in their stalls. In town, their children and grandchildren slept in their own beds, safe and loved and provided for. And on the porch of the farmhouse, two people who had found each other against all odds sat together, hands joined, hearts joined, lives joined, looking forward to whatever tomorrow might bring. Because whatever it brought, they would face it together, as they always had, as they always would, until the end of their days. This was their story, the story of the widow and the cowboy, of loss and love, of hardship and triumph, of two people who had saved each other and built something beautiful from the ashes of grief. It was a story with a happy ending, the kind that only comes from real work, real sacrifice, and real love. And it was a story that would continue through their children and grandchildren, echoing down through the generations, a testament to what two people can accomplish when they choose each other, when they work together, when they never give up on building the life they dream of. The night deepened, stars wheeling slowly overhead, and still they sat together, reluctant to let the perfect evening end. But eventually the air grew cold and they went inside, to the warm house that had sheltered them through so many years, to the bed they had shared through happiness and sorrow, to the life they had built together brick by brick, season by season, year by year. And they slept peacefully, secure in their love and their partnership, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together as they always had, as they always would forever.